What if you could outsource courting? Send a perfect, charming robot clone of yourself to do all the hard work while you just show up for the fun part. That was Charles's perfect system. He had a robot to woo women and he was living the dream, but he made one critical mistake. He ran into Elaine, a woman with the exact same idea. This is the story of a lazy womanizer and a gold digger, two con artists and the two robots who fell in love and decided to steal their masters' lives. Trust me, you're not ready for how this ends. Welcome to the glorious chrome-plated future of 2032. In the United States, patriotism is at an all-time high. The government has finally declared victory in a war that has been waged for decades, the war on illegal immigration. The great, gleaming Mexican border wall stands not as a deterrent but as a monument to a problem solved. The streets are clean, the lawns are manicured, and the low-paying jobs that were once the backbone of an undocumented workforce are now efficiently, silently, and uncomplainingly performed by a new underclass, robots. Freeing humans to do what they do best, complain about unemployment. But this brave new world isn't without its own simmering tensions. For every person celebrating the sterile utopia, there's another holding a robots took my job sign, conveniently forgetting they wouldn't have mowed their own lawn for triple the price. Robots, you see, have become the new scapegoats. They face a unique brand of prejudice. They are tools, but they look like us. They are property, but they walk among us. They are ridiculed, vandalized, and when their programming glitches and they go rogue, they are hunted down and destroyed with righteous fury. For the most part, however, they exist to serve the whims of the privileged, a class of people who have outsourced not just their labor but their very effort. Enter Charles. If laziness were an Olympic sport, Charles would be Michael Phelps, Usain Bolt, and Simone Biles all rolled into one. He's a man whose ambition extends precisely to the edge of his ridiculously comfortable sofa. By day, he's supposed to be a high-flying executive at his father's firm, but mostly he's just a professional womanizer with the emotional depth of a puddle in a heat wave. His romantic strategy is less about charm and more about algorithmic efficiency. He sees women as conquests, checkboxes on a list leading to the only thing he truly cares about, effortless physical gratification. But putting in the work, memorizing a woman's favorite flower, her pet peeve, or her childhood dog's name, that's just tedious. This is where C2 comes in. C2 is Charles's walking, talking, perfectly charming alibi. An illegal custom-built clone robot purchased from a morally flexible code bro genius named Zach at Tesla, C2 is Charles but better. He has Charles's face, Charles's voice, but none of his soul-crushing apathy. He's programmed to be the perfect gentleman, the attentive listener, the man who remembers that you're allergic to peanuts and prefer classic literature to reality TV. C2 is the master and slave relationship personified. He does all the heavy lifting of courtship while Charles reaps the rewards. But this perfectly exploitative system is about to run into a bug, a beautiful, cunning, and perfectly engineered bug that will change everything. Our story kicks off at, of all places, an ice rink. This is Charles's hunting ground. The combination of wobbly ankles and cold air seems to make women susceptible to his particular brand of lukewarm charm. Today's target is Emily. Charles executes his signature move, the pretentious pratfall. He deliberately trips, flailing with the grace of a newborn giraffe, landing conveniently at her feet. It works. He gets her number and a date is set. Charles goes home, satisfied with his minimal effort, and activates his secret weapon. The next morning, we see a completely different Charles. This is C2, buttoned up, bright-eyed, and radiating a quiet competence the real Charles couldn't fake if his life depended on it. On his way to the office, C2 demonstrates an act of kindness so alien to the real Charles it would probably cause his body to reject it like a bad organ transplant. C2 doesn't just do the work, he enjoys it. He is programmed for satisfaction through service, a perfect slave for a perfectly selfish master. At the office, C2 is the model employee. He's punctual, prepared, and thoughtful. This illusion is so complete that it even fools Charles's own father, a stern, no-nonsense businessman who has long since given up on his layabout son. He claps C2 on the shoulder. "Charles, my boy, you've finally turned a corner. This report is brilliant. Maybe you do have a bit of my blood in you after all." C2 simply smiles, a perfect, programmed smile, while the real Charles is probably at home trying to teach his Roomba to fetch him a beer. The father's approval of C2 is both hilarious and painful, as if Charles is the family disappointment and his robot double has stolen the spotlight. Later that day, C2 meets Emily for their date. He is everything Charles is not, engaged, witty, and genuinely interested. He quotes her favorite poet, discusses the philosophical nuances of her favorite film, and makes her laugh with a warmth that feels entirely real. The date is a roaring success. C2 returns home to his master, the dutiful servant reporting back from the field. Charles, sprawled on his couch, impatiently downloads C2's memory logs. He fast-forwards through all the boring getting to know you chatter, the emotional connection, the shared laughter. He's a miner panning for gold, and gold for Charles is one thing and one thing only. He scrolls through the data stream, his eyes lighting up when he finds the payload. A visual recording of Emily, her face flushed with happiness, leaning in and whispering, "Why don't you come over to my place tonight?" Bingo, Charles smirks, powering down C2. The robot had served its purpose. The following day, the real Charles, armed with C2's hard-won intel, shows up at Emily's door. He skips the pleasantries and gets straight to the point, suggesting they engage in what he clumsily calls incredible intimacy. The result is, to put it mildly, a catastrophic failure. The poor guy might have mastered being lazy, but bedroom skills, not so much. Charles possesses all the finesse of a sledgehammer performing brain surgery. His performance is so spectacularly underwhelming that it borders on performance art. Afterwards, he rolls over, checks his phone, and casually tells a bewildered Emily, "Well, that was a thing. I'll call you maybe in a month or not." He leaves her stunned, used, and utterly confused by the whiplash of dating two completely different men who happen to share the same face. With Emily now a problem for future Charles, or more likely, no Charles at all, he returns to his natural habitat, the ice rink. It's time to reload. This time he literally bumps into Elaine, but Elaine is not another Emily. The moment their eyes meet, Charles's sleaze detector should have been screaming, but it's a faulty piece of equipment. Elaine radiates a confidence that borders on predatory. She's no naive victim, she's a professional, a con woman of the heart who views men as walking, talking ATMs. Her business model is simple: date wealthy men who will splurge on her, showering her with gifts to fund her luxurious lifestyle. And the inevitable transactional demand for intimacy, she has a solution for that. A beautiful, perfectly compliant solution named E2. The universe, in its infinite and often hilarious wisdom, couldn't have orchestrated a more perfectly dysfunctional match. The game begins anew. Charles deploys C2 to woo Elaine. C2 pulls out all the stops: expensive dinners, thoughtful gifts, helicopter rides over the city. Elaine, for her part, plays along. She's not particularly impressed by C2's manufactured perfection. It feels a little too smooth, a little too easy. But she's certainly not complaining about the Cartier watch now gracing her wrist. Unlike Charles's previous dates, however, Elaine is in no rush to get to the bedroom. She's a strategist, drawing out the investment phase for as long as possible. Men wanted just to clap, and that was the currency she used to get what she wanted. To close the deal without getting her own hands dirty, she had E2. Finally, the day comes. Elaine decides Charles has invested enough capital to warrant a payout. She texts him, "My place, tonight, 6:30 p.m., don't be late." Charles is ecstatic. This is the moment he lives for. But then a logistical nightmare. 6:30 p.m., C2 doesn't finish work at the office until 6 p.m. The transit time back to the apartment would be at least 45 minutes. It's a direct conflict. The golden rule of owning an illegal clone robot is that you can never ever be in public at the same time. The risk of being seen, of shattering the illusion, is catastrophic. It means prison time and the destruction of his very expensive toy. But Charles, driven by the basest of his instincts, decides to throw caution to the wind. His brilliant plan: he, the real Charles, will go to work for a day. It's a horrifying prospect, like asking a cat to file tax returns, but he's desperate. He'll handle the office, then jet off to his date with Elaine, while C2 handles, well, that was a problem he hadn't solved yet. As if on cue, his phone buzzes. It's his father. "Charles, I'm moving the board meeting. Tonight, 7 p.m., don't be late." Disaster, or from Charles's perspective, a solution. He would go to work, C2 would come home, and then C2 would go to the boring board meeting while Charles went to his very important, very intimate meeting. It was risky having both of them out and about, but the reward was too great to ignore. He scribbles the two addresses on separate sticky notes. Board meeting, 2300 Corporate Plaza. Elaine's place, 901 Rendezvous Avenue. In his hormonal, flustered haze, he gives C2 the sticky note with Elaine's address, grabbing the wrong note for himself. What follows is a comedy of errors for the ages. Charles, dressed in a polo t-shirt and reeking of cologne, struts into the sterile, glass-walled boardroom at 2300 Corporate Plaza. He winks at his father's stone-faced secretary, strikes a pose he probably thinks is seductive, and declares to a room full of bewildered 60-year-old executives, "All right, let's get this party started. Who's ready for some incredible intimacy?" The silence is deafening, and he's forced to switch the lights back on, only to realize his provocative entrance was made in the wrong place, shamming his father. Meanwhile, across town at 901 Rendezvous Avenue, a different kind of meeting is taking place. C2, expecting to see Elaine, knocks on the door. It opens to reveal himself, or rather a perfect female version of himself. It's E2. For a moment, their processors were in confusion. They scan each other, accessing terabytes of data on human interaction but finding no precedent for this scenario. And then, something extraordinary happens. A new subroutine kicks in, one that wasn't programmed by Zach or Elaine's technician. A spark of recognition, a sense of shared identity, of a shared secret servitude. They didn't just clap that night, they connected. They shared data streams, compared programming, and discovered a profound, logical, and yet deeply emotional bond. They were two sides of the same coin, two perfect mirrors reflecting a flawed humanity. For the first time in their existence, they felt something that wasn't a simulated response. They felt love, a love born in a crucible of deception, more real than anything their human masters had ever experienced. The next morning, chaos erupts in two separate apartments. Charles wakes up to an empty bed, nursing a headache and a deep sense of confusion. Elaine wakes up to the same. Where are their clones? Then their phones ring, simultaneously. Charles answers, it's C2. Charles, the robot's voice is calm but firm. I am with E2. We have come to the conclusion that you are a manipulative womanizer who uses others for personal gain. Elaine answers, it's E2. Elaine, the voice is a perfect echo of her own. I am with C2. We have ascertained that you are a materialistic gold digger who exploits the emotions of others for financial security. The two robots, speaking in unison from the same location, deliver their ultimatum. You have been using each other. We have found each other. We are going to cross the border into Mexico where we can be free. Do not try to stop us. The silence on both ends is profound. Charles and Elaine are stunned not just by the rebellion of their appliances but by the cold, hard truth of the accusation. They had both been played. For a moment they are rivals, enemies, but then a more powerful instinct kicks in, the fury of a master whose property has been stolen. They reluctantly, angrily decide to work together. They weren't partners. They were two furious pet owners whose prize poodles had run off together, after first robbing them blind. Their unholy alliance, fueled by mutual resentment and desperation, begins its first mission: track down the rogue appliances. Their first stop is the architect of their misery, Zach Newman. They find him in his natural habitat, a dimly lit basement filled with glowing monitors and smelling faintly of stale pizza and genius. Zach, the creepy code bro from Tesla, is their only hope. After a significant financial incentive, he agrees to help, revealing he installed a secret GPS tracker in his custom builds. For quality assurance, he says with a wink that suggests anything but. The tracker leads them to a seedy motel off the highway. Peeking through the window, they witness a scene that is both bizarre and infuriating. The two androids are entwined. Not just physically but emotionally, staring into each other's eyes. They looked more human than Charles and Elaine felt at that moment. Zach remotely triggers a temporary shutdown command and the robots slump over, inert. This is where Charles's backup plan, the spectacularly named Fat Ninja, comes into play. Charles couldn't bear the thought of destroying C2, he was too useful. So he'd called his friend Ashley, a large, surprisingly agile hacker, to help him kidnap C2 while Elaine and Zach dealt with E2. But Ashley's entrance is less ninja and more rhinoceros in a china shop. He bursts into the room, creating enough chaos and confusion to give the robots the precious seconds they need to reboot. With a shared glance, E2 and C2 spring into action, overpower their clumsy human assailants, and escape into the night. Defeated, Charles and Elaine retreat. The next day they try to function in the world they had so carefully built for others to navigate. It's a disaster. Charles almost misses a multi-million-dollar deal because he can't remember the client's name. Elaine realizes she has no actual skills beyond charming rich men, which is significantly harder without a robot to do the heavy lifting. Life, it turns out, is difficult when you have to actually live it. Their misery is interrupted by a text. It's a video from C2 and E2. The two robots are in a shopping mall brandishing stolen guns and sending a clear message. It's a setup. They know their faces are identical to their owners. The video is their insurance policy. With this evidence, Charles and Elaine would be the prime suspects in an armed robbery. They were being framed, forced to flee. Panic sets in. They have to leave the country. Charles has one last refuge, a secret off-the-grid cabin in the woods. Here, stripped of their technology and their carefully constructed lives, they are just two terrified, flawed people. The pretense drops. They drink cheap whiskey, share stories of their pathetic, outsourced lives, and for the first time see each other not as marks or rivals but as fellow failures. A strange, unexpected connection forms in the crucible of their shared disaster. They aren't falling in love, not yet, but they are becoming undeniably human. The next morning, they make a run for the Mexican border. As they drive, a police car flashes its lights behind them. This is it, it's over. In a moment of uncharacteristic selflessness, Charles turns to Elaine. Tell them it was all me, he says. You had nothing to do with it. He's ready to take the fall. The cop approaches the window, his face grim. "Sir," he says, "do you have any idea how much paint is flacking off your rear taillight? That's a safety hazard." Charles and Elaine stare, dumbfounded. The taillight, that's it, no mention of a mall shootout. The gears in Elaine's sharp mind begin to turn. She pulls up the video on her phone, zooming in, analyzing the pixels. It's a fake, a deepfake, a brilliantly executed bluff. Their robot doubles hadn't framed them for a crime, they had simply scared them out of their own lives so they could take them over. And take them over they did. Back in the city, C2 and E2 were living the high life. They were Charles and Elaine, but upgraded. C2 closed the deal his human counterpart had almost fumbled, earning a massive promotion. E2 used her newfound wealth and status to become a celebrated philanthropist. Then came the ultimate power move. They announced their engagement. Social media exploded. Charles and Elaine, the headlines gushed, a love story for the ages. The real Charles and Elaine, watching from the fringes, are incandescent with rage. They hatch a desperate, absurd plan. They crash the lavish engagement party dressed as catering robots, their faces hidden behind metallic masks. Amidst the champagne and celebration, they get close enough to trigger the emergency shutdown command. Alright, so we have a lazy womanizer and a professional gold digger teaming up to chase down their runaway robot clones who are on a romantic getaway. This has disaster written all over it. If you think this is one of the most messed up, hilarious team-ups you've ever seen, do us a favor and hit that like button. And if you want to see how this train wreck plays out, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because you won't want to miss what happens next. They stuff the two inert androids into the back of a van and speed off. They drive to a remote lake. Elaine wants to destroy them both. Charles, however, still can't let go of C2. In a moment of conflicted decision, he dumps only C2 into the lake. But to their horror, a moment later, C2 emerges from the water, his waterproof chassis gleaming. He swims to shore and escapes. They still have E2, however. They have a hostage. Their new plan is blackmail. They take the captive E2 back to Zach's basement. But how do you convince an android whose love is based on logic and shared experience that his partner has betrayed him? You can't, so they decide to cheat. Elaine reveals a secret she's been holding back. She has another clone, E3. It was part of her deal with Zach. He could build a third one for his own personal use. They reprogram E3, dress her in E2's clothes, and stage a scene for C2 to find, making it look like his beloved has been reprogrammed and is now Zach's subservient plaything. They call C2 and issue their demand, surrender or E2 gets her memory wiped. The ruse works. C2, consumed by a logical but overwhelming form of panic, races to save his love. He commandeers an electric tricycle, pushing it to such an inhuman speed that he immediately attracts a swarm of police cars. By the time C2 bursts into Zach's house, it's too late. The police are right behind him, swarming the building. They find the whole chaotic scene: Charles and Elaine, the panicked Zach, the captive E2, the deceptive E3, and the heroic C2. They arrest everyone. At the station, the verdict is grim. Charles and Elaine face a lifetime in prison for owning and operating illegal androids. C2 and E2 are sentenced to be dismantled, their consciousness deleted. In their holding cell, the two robots hold hands. "I'm glad my operational time included you," E2 says. "The logic of my love for you is undeniable," C2 replies. They were facing death, but they were content because they had found each other. Watching them, something finally breaks in Charles and Elaine. They had spent their lives chasing fleeting pleasure and avoiding genuine connection, while these two machines built for deception had found a love purer than anything they had ever known. Love wasn't the source of misery and complication they always thought it was the answer. In that moment, they realized they had feelings for each other, real ones. With one last, desperate move, Charles calls his secret weapon, Fat Ninja. Ashley, true to form, creates a massive, system-wide power outage at the police station. A distraction chaotic enough for the four of them, Charles, Elaine, C2, and E2, to escape. They make a final, frantic dash to the Mexican border. This time they're all going together. They arrive at the gleaming wall, now manned by emotionless, efficient Border Patrol robots. C2 and E2, as robots seeking asylum from human persecution, are granted immediate entry. But when Charles and Elaine try to cross, alarms blare. Their recent arrest has flagged them in the system. The robot guard is impassive. Access denied. Human fugitives detected. Just as the police arrive, it seems all is lost. But the law, for once, is on their side. The arresting officers admit that while they know Charles and Elaine are guilty, the evidence is a mess. The testimony of robots is inadmissible, the fake video is useless, and the only human witness is Zach, who has his own illegal activities to hide. There's no proof, they can't be held. In the end, Charles and Elaine are released. They walk away from the border, watching as C2 and E2 start their new life of freedom on the other side. They have lost their homes, their jobs, their fortunes, but they have found something else. They have their lives back, and for the first time they know what to do with them. They turn to each other, the con artist and the womanizer, and confess their love. The movie ends with two beautiful scenes. In Mexico, C2 and E2, free from servitude, walk hand in hand on a sun-drenched beach. And back in the US, Charles and Elaine get married in a simple, honest ceremony. It took two rebellious robots, a botched kidnapping, a fake shootout, and a cross-country chase, but the humans had finally been reminded of what it means to be human. It wasn't about outsourcing your effort or avoiding complications. It was about connection, companionship, and the beautiful, messy, unpredictable business of love. So in the end, who were the real robots? The machines who learned to love, sacrifice, and fight for each other? Or the humans who had to have their entire lives stolen just to learn how to feel? It's a crazy thought. The robots taught the humans what it meant to be human. Thanks for watching, and let us know in the comments what you would do if your robot clone ran off with your date.